Well, let's start.
All right. Go ahead, Luis.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Tom. It's a
Hello,
pleasure to
Luis.
be back here. So, my question is you've said that in other realities, you practically have no language barrier due to some sort of telepathic communication. That makes me wonder, what function does language have in our PMR regarding its nature as a constriction, a code, to the open possibility of just mind reading or accessing the database altogether? Is language just an apparent constraint, like part of the rule set on the free flow of information throughout the LCS? Specifically, for example, are words just organized informational cues to access information in a coordinated, like in an interaction or a conversation, meaning they're not really fundamental or essential, and not different, for example, for the chat room of a massive multiplayer game like World of Warcraft, which is kind of just a predisposed way of communication, but has no really relevance on a fundamental level of how the information could flow, in a larger reality. So that will be my question, Tom. Thank you.
Okay. Well, language does have a fundamental connection to us, I think, or maybe not fundamentals, maybe not the right word, a very important connection. And that is, it allows us detail. It allows us precision in our communication. When you communicate conscious to consciousness, usually it's metaphorical. It's in big picture terms that you get, just big picture knowing. You don't necessarily get the details, though. You get kind of what matters. But it's sort of like speed reading, I guess. A lot of times when people speed read, it's like that. They get the flow of the story. They know what's going on, but they miss a lot of the details. Well, it's like that. At least my experience with telepathic communication is that it's not real detailed. You just get the important stuff that you need to know. You don't pick up on all the little other nuances so much. Where with language is, I guess, in its most fundamental sense, it's a way for us to organize our thoughts in detail. It gives us a way to organize them. Otherwise, we would just have these kind of big picture metaphorical thoughts coming around, but it would be hard for us to organize and hard for us to communicate with precision. So I think that's the thing, with language. Some people will say that we think in language. And if we don't have language, we really wouldn't be able to think very well either. We'd have ideas and things kind of flying around, but to get them ordered, to get them structured, to get them, lined out in some kind of specific format and detail, that we wouldn't be able to do that. That the only reason you can pull together coherent thoughts is because you have a language in which to structure them. And that, I think, is the key thing for language, is that it enables us to structure our thoughts in a very consistent and detailed way, so that we can do things that require detail, like, following a recipe, doing mathematics, solving problems. Those things require very detailed, structured processes. They're not things that you just kind of generally get it. It's something that really needs to be followed. Doing chemistry, it requires precision. So language gives us that ability to structure our thinking in precise ways. And I guess it doesn't matter so much what the language is, as long as it gives us that ability. So we have lots of different languages that have just had to grown up in various geographical areas, just to allow those people to structure their thoughts in whatever way just happened to grow up, you know, whatever happened to be there. So I guess in that sense, language is not fundamental, like consciousness is fundamental, but it is kind of fundamental to the way we interact and what we do and what humans are capable of. It's fundamental to our ability to think clearly and communicate clearly. You know, we have languages of all levels of detail. You know, I guess at the very least detail, it's called you know, grunt and gesture. You know, it's the you know, waving hands and this kind of thing. And you know, and people can speak like that. There's a certain amount of language that you can communicate just with making sounds and gesturing. And then, of course, you know, from there, it gets more and more precise. The gestures more and more precise. You know, the sounds more and more precise. So language is just, it probably all starts with grunts and gestures, but ends up with precision, as people need to have that structure in order to communicate clearly. So that's language. Now, when I've gone to other places, other realms, you know, other places, and you kind of hear people talking. You know, well, how does that work? You know, they're not necessarily speaking English, you know, or Portuguese or French or anything. They're just speaking whatever they might speak, but I hear it perfectly clearly. And I think that's just the LCS doing the translation. Otherwise, it would be impossible for people to connect, even within consciousness, outside of their own language group. Now, that is the way it is here in our virtual reality, you know, the physical universe. We can't communicate well unless people speak our language. We speak their language. But if you think of consciousness and how deep and broad and wide a field that is, that would be a rather, you know, difficult situation. So somehow the system just seems to be able to make that translation to us, so that whatever we're listening to, whoever we're talking to, just comes across just like they were speaking our own language, because it's all virtual reality. So the system is, you know, is tracking, creating, rendering all of it. So there aren't any languages, you know, that the system doesn't know, because they're all being rendered, you know. So it's aware of all of that. So it just does the translation for us. So that's my thought. That's my thought on it. But yeah, it's kind of an odd thing. You know, you're off in some other physical reality. It's not even, you know, in this universe. And there they are, you know, speaking, and you're speaking to them, and there seems to be no language barrier. It appears that they're speaking my language. And I think to them, I appear as though I'm speaking their language. And it just doesn't ever seem to be a problem. So my only thought is that the LCS is somehow the real-time translator for all of that, just to enable us to communicate with each other. I mean, that's the whole point, right? Consciousness, interaction with each other, learning and growing through communicating. Well, if we all were still back in grunts and gestures because we, you know, had to learn a common language, then that would limit that growth a whole lot. So those are my thoughts on it.
Thank you, Tom. It's a fascinating topic that I could go on and on, but thank you very much.
Yeah.
Michael.
Yeah, hi, Tom. I really enjoyed our meeting over at the Chess Institute. I really appreciate that. I have a follow-up question to that. It's not over chess. I told you about my gold Cadillac. which I kind of focused my intent. I was very naive. I said, gee, I'd really like a gold station wagon. I got this like 1 in 100 million car. I didn't realize how rare that was. And then I got full of fear that it was going to be damaged. And then I got the 1 in a million hailstorm on top of it. What was interesting was I talked to my chiropractor, it was parked in her driveway. And I found out this week that her car was a complete write-off. So I started to feel pretty, I don't know, I felt like a heel because, you know, my kind of fear and ego had caused her harm, and she's a good healer. So I guess one question is these low probability events kind of a signature of the LCS interest? And then, you know, do we have to be careful with focusing our intent? Because, you know, sometimes you get what you wish for and there's, you know, unforeseen circumstances. Like it has to be from a good place.
Well,
So
yes,
those
all of that is true. But we are interactive. We're in a multiplayer game. And the choices that one person makes affects other people. And that's just the nature of our game. So if in your world, you know, your fear helps create a hailstorm, then that hailstorm is going to affect other people. And in their fears, if they fear various things, it may affect your game. So we all interact with each other. And yes, you need to be careful of what you wish for or what you're fearful of, because it's not just you. We don't live on an island by ourselves. And what we do and what we think and how we are and the choices we make affect lots and lots of people. And when we affect somebody else, then they take that effect and they affect others who then affect others. And these things ripple out through, often, tens, if not hundreds of people are affected because of a choice that, you made. So yes, that's just the nature of a multiplayer game. And in a way, it may seem a little unfair that somebody who has a lot of very negative thoughts would then create havoc with other people. But the whole point is that we're supposed to grow up together, right? We're supposed to help each other grow up by interacting with each other. We're supposed to figure this out, lower our entropy, and grow up. So, yeah, it can't be any other way. It can't be any other way. If you were just on an island and only affected yourself, your growth would be very slow. It wouldn't be so quick. And part of this amazing environment that we interact with is so full of opportunity just because of that, because there's so many people stirring the pot and we are caught in their ripples, just like they're caught in ours, gives us tremendous opportunities to grow. Lots of opportunities there. Lots of learning situations are created just because we're in this soup together. And we all have to grow up together.
Yeah, I'm amazed by these low probability events. Like, it blows me away. It's like winning the lottery twice. It's unfathomable. But I know you talk about paranormal events, but these sometimes they're kooky. It's like, I can't explain them, but they happen.
Yes, very strange things happen. And who knows how many other people were also touching that same kind of event that you experienced.
Yes. All right. Thank you, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
Christian, please go ahead.
Hello, Tom. Hello, everyone. I have a personal question, but I hope maybe someone else will benefit. I often find that what I call my energies behave in a way that I do not like, and more importantly, they do this against my conscious intent. There's actually many examples of that process in my daily living, One of them is that sometimes my energies just float away from me to someone or something else, and which leaves me quite weak. Another one is that during healing, I have tendency to take on someone else's stuff, which makes me feeling unwell until I deal with it. What concerns me is the fact that these things and many others happen automatically, and more importantly, against my conscious intent, which can be quite disempowering. In one of your previous talks, when someone asked you about knee-jerk reaction with negative emotions, you said that intention kept in front of a mind 24/7, stating, "I do not want to be that way," would resolve that issue. So my question is, would it also help in my case, or is there some better or more direct way? Maybe healing this issue as you heal a physical condition with light or another metaphor. Also, where do these programs reside within consciousness and why they are so reluctant to change?
Okay. A lot of what you're experiencing is an interplay between your intuitive self and your intellectual self. Your intellectual self obviously is not always in control. You know, that's the thinking part of you that says, "Oh, I don't want to be that way." That's thinking that you're not always in control. There's a lot of other things going on in the intuitive realm, like you picking up on other people's things, or just your own energy kind of drifts away, or that sort of thing. That's because in the intuitive side, you're not really paying attention. You tend to drift in that intuitive side, and you're not really focused there. You're not there with a purpose and with direction. You just kind of, that intuitive side of you just drifts around however it does. And the intellectual side wants it to straighten up and fly right and stop doing things that cause you trouble, but it doesn't work that way. You know, you have to take you have to be in charge of that intuitive side, be aware of that intuitive side, what it's doing, why it's doing it, and kind of rein it in to where it's working with you, not just kind of, you know, doing what it is. It's almost like that intuitive side. If you haven't developed it very well, it's sort of like an unruly child. If you're not there watching it all the time, it tends to wander off and sometimes get into trouble. You know, do things that you wish it wouldn't do. So it's like that. So you have to spend more time with your intuitive side, being aware of it, aware of what it's doing, and be more purposeful with it rather than just let it kind of wander around aimlessly. So that would be what you'd like to do. But the idea that you keep in your mind, I don't want to be, you know, I don't want my intuitive side just to wander around aimlessly. I'd like to be aware of what's it doing and stay connected with that all the time. Be mindful of that part of me. If you continue to say that 24/7 and you keep that in your mind, then that will work, because that will be the kind of the trip cord that will let you know you're drifting. You need to pay attention. And what you'll find is when you gather all of yourself together, not just your intellectual part, but when you gather it all together and have it all working together, you will be enabling a whole different level of existence. You'll be working with all of your parts. And that is really where you want to go. So yes, use that same trick of keeping your intent focused on what you want to become and that you want to be differently, but also be aware of what your intuition is doing, where it's drifting, what's catching its focus. I think that analogy of it being kind of an unruly child is probably a very good analogy. You know, if you have an unruly child and you stop paying attention to them, you know, they're going to find something to get into, something to connect with, or they're just going to kind of wander off and get lost. You know, they do that too. You have to keep reining in. And when you get control of that unruly child, then you can make it part of yourself and your progress and what you do. It can be, well, you know, it can be another part of you that is very functional rather than a part of you that's now kind of dysfunctional. And then you'll be whole. You'll have all of yourself working together. Now you'll be able to use that intuitive side as a tool, not something that you have to chase after and keep in line and keeps bothering you by wandering off, but something that you can actually, you can actually put to work for you. It just takes practice. Now, see, you and people go through that. The reason that you're there is that you've grown up enough to be aware that you have an intuitive side. So you're aware of it. You recognize it. You realize that it wanders off sometimes, and that sometimes it gets fixated on certain things, and otherwise it causes you a little difficulty. But you're not quite to the point where you're in control of it. It's a part of you. So it's just a natural growth step. A lot of people are not even aware they have an intuitive side. So they don't have your problem. As far as they're concerned, life's just like that. Sometimes you drift off and disappear, and sometimes you're paying attention, and basically they just kind of flopping around in their life, and they think that's just normal. They don't realize that there's another way of existing. So you've grown up enough that you realize that you've got this other part of you, but it's not really paying attention. It's not, it's not yet trained to be part of you. That will come. Keep working. Just the fact that you have the problem shows that you're making progress.
Thanks.
All right.
That helps a lot.
All right, thank you. Catherine.
Hi, Tom.
Hello.
Thank you for taking my question today. What does the LCS or you suggest to help when one of one's loved ones has been suffering for years, the actual ill person, and his father and sisters are suffering watching his suffering? I don't ask why, way past that, but rather, how do I support those when there's ongoing suffering? And yes, the ripple effect is powerful, to pick up on Michael and your answer.
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing that the only thing you can do there, besides the things that you're already doing, I'm sure you're already using your intent, being positive, you have all those things that you can do, is always being positive. If you let that situation drag you down into negativity, then you become part of that problem, not a solution for it. So you have to always stay positive. And the way you do that in that kind of a situation, it's a hard thing to do, but the way you do that is to accept things the way they are. They are the way they are. People are in the position, in the situation, having the experience that they're having. And it's not your choice. You're not the master of the universe. You cannot say, oh, you can have this situation and you need to have this other situation. Your life needs to be happy and full of good cheer. And your life, pain is something that you need to work through. You don't get to choose. So people just are the way they are for whatever the circumstances are and however it happened. It just is that way. And if you accept that and say, all right, everybody's on their own path. Everybody's on their own path, and they have to deal with what they have to deal with. They have to deal with what life presents them at the time. Now, sometimes that's easy. Life presents you, a bed of roses and, and a box of chocolates. But other times it isn't. Other times it's very, very difficult. Other times there's a lot of pain involved in it. But whatever it is, that's where each person is. And theirs is to accept that everybody is on their own path, learning their own thing. Okay? The person who's suffering, the person who's in pain, that's their path. At this lifetime, their path is to have to deal with that. Now, maybe that might be horrendous, but that's what they have this time. This is only one chapter in a book of, thousands of chapters. Every once in a while, all of us have a lifetime where what we experience is really, really difficult. That's part of growing up. If growing up were all just the easy, fun stuff, nobody would grow up much. So sometimes people, what they have to deal with is horrendous. But if that's the way it is for them now, this time, then you have to let them be that and say, okay, that's what they need to do, is deal with this situation the best they can. And they are going to grow by how they deal with it. Now, you may think of, let's say, a terrible situation where somebody's in a whole lot of pain, but they are dealing with it as best they can. They're dealing with it positively, and they're dealing with it with a lot of effort and strength and fortitude. And you look at them and you say, wow, they're learning a lot. They're really growing up. This is going to be a very successful incarnation for them. You see, they're learning a lot. They're doing it because they could just dissolve into self-pity. That would be the other choice, but they're not doing that. Well, the harder the lesson, the more there is to learn from it. The more you get out of it. So you look at people like that and you think, well, this is a tough one for them. This particular incarnation is going to be just one of those that's hard, and they have to deal with it. And it's not your thing to interfere really with what they have to do. Now, you should always be positive. You should be caring. You should try to be as helpful as possible. I don't mean that you have this callous attitude toward everybody and say, yeah, who cares about anybody else? Everybody's on their own track. So, I don't have any empathy for anybody. No, that's not the point. You should have empathy. You should care, because that's your choices. You have your choices to make, and by your choices, you're going to evolve or de-evolve. So you need to be as caring and supportive and giving and helpful as you can be, because that's how you grow up. But you also have to realize that they have to deal with what they have to deal with. You don't take that on. That's not your thing. In other words, your idea that you're suffering and you're unhappy because they're unhappy, well, that's not helpful. It's not only unhelpful to you, but it's very unhelpful to them, because they're lying here having this very hard row to hoe, this very difficult thing to do, and they realize that they're making all the people they love unhappy. Well, now you've just added another burden for them to have to deal with. You see, now that's just something else. All right, it wasn't bad enough with, all the pain they're dealing with, but now they have to deal with they're making everybody else feel pain. And that makes them want to exit, because they want to stop causing other people pain. Well, that's really, they need to do what they're here to do. They need to deal with it the best way they can. You need to be as helpful as you can, but you need not to feel like you're unhappy and upset because of their pain. Let them own their pain. You just take care of yourself, which means be as helpful and caring as possible. And they're going to try to be as positive as they can and helpful. they're learning maybe very big lessons, going to take a big step forward. Well, you can too, by being a positive part of that problem. And the same with all the rest of the family. It's not just you and that person. Each one has to let the person that's suffering do their thing. Be positive in their role of what they're doing. To feel bad for them to the point that it makes you feel bad just turns you from part of the solution, being a positive thing in their life, to moping around, being upset, and adding to their problem. So that's the way you need to approach it. You have to let other people be who they are. Let them have whatever their situation is. Let them face it, learn their lessons from it, help how you can help, but don't feel bad that they feel bad. Don't be crushed by their ailment. Let them have their ailment, and you be a positive thing. Well, okay, they may have to suffer, but they've got positive, smiling people around them. Wow, does that make that suffering so much easier? The worst case is they have to suffer, and they're making everybody else in their life, that they care about, suffer too. That's so much worse. So that's the thing, Catherine. You just have to let things be as they are. Accept them. That is the card that people have drawn for this particular time. They have to deal with that. And all you can do is be as positive and caring and helpful. And by being negative, you become part of the problem. By being upset, you become part of the problem. And that's so of everybody around them. It's not just you, but everybody. You see, that's, look at the people who are handicapped. The handicapped people, okay, they only have one leg, say, or one arm, or no arms, or something, and they have to get through life. What is it that annoys them the most? It's the pity they get from other people. People who feel bad because they're not whole. Oh, I'm so sorry you don't have any legs. That must be horrible. The people who feel negativity because of them. That's the hard thing for them to deal with. Just dealing with the fact that they have no legs. Well, if they are growing up, they do that. They deal with that. They'll work with it. And if they meet people that can just talk to them, hey, no-legged guy, how you doing today? Without any of that, oh no, gee, what happened to you kind of thing, then that's something that's good for them. They want just to connect with other people naturally. They don't want their injury, their problem, to be the thing that everybody sees. They want people to see them, you see? So it's the same sort of thing. You have to just let them be. Feeling sorry for them actually becomes part of their problem. Just accept them and say, okay, here's somebody with a handicap. How's it going? Yeah, do you need any help? What can I do? Have a nice day. And they like that because now they're being treated just like everybody else, about the person they are, not their handicap is the main big thing, They want to be just another person that interacts with another person. They don't want the handicap to be the only thing that's in their reality. So this is the same way. You have to just say, okay, some people, they're born with no legs. Well, they're still people. Let's interact with them. Let's tell them jokes, let's smile at them, ask them how they're doing, talk about their life. Don't focus on what you see as the negative. So it's the same sort of thing. That's how you can stay happy and positive in a world that's full of greed and hate and dysfunction. A lot of times I run into people that say, oh, the world sucks, it's so bad. Look at it. Everybody's greedy and ripping everybody else off, and control, power, force. That's the whole thing going on here. How awful. Well, if you let that make you upset, then you become part of the problem. Better that you look at that dysfunctional world and say, wow, sure is dysfunctional. Well, let's be positive. Let's do whatever we can do. Let's give what we can give. And we have to let people be who they are. If people are really greedy, well, they're greedy. That's where they are in their evolution. Maybe they're in a process of de-evolution, but that's their thing. Don't make it your thing. So you're in a particularly difficult situation, but there's literally millions of people who feel bummed out just about living in a world that is so negative that it makes them negative too. See, it's a very similar kind of thing. You can't let other people's lack of growth, other people's lack of conscious quality make you negative, make you upset, make you hurt, make you dysfunctional. You've got to let them be who they are and deal with their life however it is, and you just deal with them, and they are who they are, and you let it all be, and you live in a place of joy, not in a place of upset and anger and dysfunction and unhappiness. So that's the perspective that you got wrong as far as interacting in a situation like that. Now, again, I say this many times, it's easy to say, hard to do. When you see somebody that you love very much in pain, it's hard to say, well, guess that's their life. It's a very difficult thing to do. I understand, but it's really what you need to do. You need to do everything you can that's positive, and then that's it. You need not to suffer because somebody else is suffering, because that just adds to their suffering. It doesn't really help them any. It doesn't help them at all. If you're suffering, it'd be so much better to be in a very positive environment. That would help buoy you up. And if you're creating this negative environment around yourself, well, that just pulls you down. So in order to be part of your, in order to not be part of your son's problem, you need to not be feeling miserable because he's feeling miserable. Okay, so I hope that helps.
It does help. It
yeah,
does help.
yeah,
And reminding me your confidence, Tom, that we are here to grow up and that there is some sort of meaning behind it makes a world of difference. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Toby, please go ahead.
Hello. I have a follow-up question specifically about brain stimulation again, because I'm having trouble figuring this out, that the brain stimulation is inducing the very limited partial data shifting experience of the tunnel or the floating, the ceiling, what have you. I know that it can't be correct that means that it's a trick of the brain, but what is the chain of logic that I'm missing as to why that's not correct?
Give me a little more to go on, Toby. I'm not entirely with you on the question.
So the study where they stimulated part of the brain and the person, they have that going through a tunnel experience, or they're floating up on the ceiling above their body. Brain stimulation is inducing that, but why? It makes it seem on the surface, that it's instead body leading, consciousness follows. But obviously, I know that can't be correct, but I can't figure out why it's not correct. What's the logic?
Okay, so how is it that somebody can stimulate the brain and get a result back
without any intent on anyone involved for that to happen as well?
Well, they're having an experience, let's say, of floating above, but they're not really having an out of body. They're not really connected to a data stream from the larger consciousness system. They're not part of a single player game like out of body is. They're not exploring consciousness. They're just, picture themselves in a different way. It's kind of a sterile experience. It's not really, it kind of mimics an out of body experience, but it isn't one. Okay? It's just a mimic. It's like you're looking similar to what an out of body might be like for some people, but it's not the same. So that would be one way to look at it. The other is that, the brain has to be something that allows the consciousness to express itself. So the consciousness, as the consciousness needs to express itself, the brain, as part of the physical body, represents the rule set. How the rule set has evolved that particular brain in that particular organism. Okay, so if you do something to that brain, it'll cause an effect, because the brain has evolved to do that. So if you pulse a particular part of it, then the person might smell something or hear something or hear a tone, or because that was the smell part of the brain and that was the hearing part of the brain, and maybe the motor part of the brain, their arm might twitch or flip or come up, something like that. So yes, the body is connected to the brain. Okay, now the consciousness is not connected to the brain. The consciousness is a separate thing. It's not physical. It just uses that physical avatar, that brain and the arms and the feet and everything. It just uses that in order to make those choices and to express itself. Okay, so if you can stimulate the brain such that a person sees themselves floating, well, okay. But see, there's nothing else behind that. All right, you can maybe do that. That's the thing, just like they hear a noise or they see a flash of light or something. So you might do that, and particularly if you have led them to that. What we're going to try to do today is stimulate your brain and see if you can't float up into the air. Well, just giving them that notion is perhaps one way to make that notion come true, just by giving them that idea. So I'd have to know a little bit more about exactly how it's done and what is said to those people in preparation and a lot of other things to get into any more detail. But I suspect that they have some idea of what it is they're doing and what the possibilities are. And if you give that to someone, well, then often that's what they see. That's what they report. I would think it would be real interesting if while they were in that floaty mode, they could do something, write a number on the blackboard, see if they could tell you what it was, see if it's functional rather than just an image. I don't know that, that'd be interesting. I don't know how that would work out, but it'd be a good experiment for them to do. See if that was a functional thing or whether all they were doing was creating a picture of themselves floating, and then they see that picture. So what they report, what they report is basically what the consciousness feels or sees. That's what they're getting. But the brain is something that it can add and it can subtract constraints when you do things to it. You often probably heard me say that you get brain damage, then the consciousness isn't damaged, but the consciousness now has to work with a damaged avatar. Well, that's increasing the constraint. You can also decrease constraints, no doubt, as well, by manipulating that. You can increase or decrease constraints. So perhaps they decrease a constraint so that the person can see themselves floating. Or maybe even, in some other reality frame, which is what happens when you take a psychotropic drug. You end up in some other reality frame. You're decreasing constraints. So it's a very complex situation, and without knowing a lot of detail of exactly how they get to where they're going, I'm not quite sure how they would decrease constraints such that that consciousness then would have that ability to do that. Maybe float up in the room and read numbers off of a blackboard. Maybe that's possible, that awareness would have those constraints reduced in order to do that. That's about as much as I can tell you. Other than that, I'm not real familiar with the research. I've heard of it, but haven't really thought about it too much.
So that situation of decreasing constraints, it doesn't change anything fundamentally about how things work?
No, it doesn't really change anything. So let's say you take a psychotropic drug, and that psychotropic drug throws you into some other reality frame. That other reality frame isn't, a fake reality. It's as real as any other reality. It's information you're getting and how you're interpreting it. Okay. And it is indeed the same kind of reality frame you'd get into if you just develop your intuitive side. You could get into a similar reality frame. So the drug is throwing you into, a non-physical reality frame. But what are you learning from that? Where's the growth in it? Where's the value in it? All right, you've seen the pretty lights, it's a nice picture. You heard the words, some big being in a white robe said, "We're all one," or something like that. So, but what difference does it make to you? You see, what do you learn from it? Does that help you now become, a more spiritual person? No, it's just an experience. There's a big difference between an experience that's something that just happens to you, as opposed to something you earn by changing who you are, by growing up. There's a really big difference. So no, it doesn't help. People can take all the drug trips into the larger consciousness system they wish, and it won't help them grow up at all. It's just an experience, like getting on a roller coaster. Wow, it's quite an experience, but you don't really learn anything from it, because the only way you learn is by the path that it takes you to get there on your own. It's that path is where the learning is, not the end point. The end point's not having the experience or having the out of body. It's what you have to go through, the discipline and the clearness you have to have in your mind. It's the process of getting there is where the growth comes from, not from seeing the picture at the end.
So even if it's artificially removing a constraint, it still fundamentally involves the same processes and the same you, essentially. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that would be a good thing to say. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I guess my final bit there is, if I track down detailed information about the specific study, should I submit it in a follow-up?
Sure. If you find something like that, I'd find it interesting.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Marla, please go ahead.
Wow, this is really thick and juicy this morning. Thank you so much, Tom. I got stuck when we were talking about purpose and intuition in flapping around. So I want to talk a little bit about that, flopping around as you speak about it, because I wanted to know, because I go in and out of these data streams all the time, and I have purpose and intention, and I use my intuition for that. But what you were talking about with Michael, getting caught in the ripples, is something I get concerned about. I don't have a lot of family or animals around me to distract me. I get to go and be with animals, or, you know, with the pandemic and everything, it's been challenging being with people, right? So I'm looking for your wisdom as to when we have the intent and we have the purpose and we're doing that. What do you do with your downtime? I don't want to get caught in the ripples that will spin me out or spin me off into any kind of fear. I want to be able to find a way to have point consciousness or a respite. And I wanted your thoughts around this, because I'd like to know what you do around it too.
I have such a small quantity of free time to wander around in that has never been a problem for me. My list is such that there's always 10 things that I didn't get done that day that have to go off to the next day. But I can see your issue. You know, you're there. You're mostly by yourself. You don't have a lot of distractions. So what do you do all that time? How do you fill that up in a positive way and learn from it? Well, I would say several things, and one is that you can take your time that you have. If you have extra time, there are things that you can do that are of service to other people that might even be fun for you to do as well. Now, not things necessarily with your intuitive side. You know, that's sort of your job, is that intuitive side of yours. That's what you do all day. That's your work. You know, you're looking for something else to do. And, you know, there are things that you can volunteer to do, that there are needs to do that you might even find interesting, like, you know, reading books into a tape recorder. You know, people are looking always for other people to do that, just to read things for the people who are blind and can't read. And there's always a big need for volunteers. And you may even read things that you find interesting or fun, or, you know, read things for children, because some children are blind as well, you know, whatever. So they're always looking for people who will take their time to sit down and make a recording. And I'm sure that's just one thing that popped to my mind, but I'm sure there are literally dozens of things like that where you could help. If you want to interact with people in a relative safe space, there's lots of volunteering to be done that really requires nothing but a you know, an open heart to do, which is things like you know, hold preemies in the clean room at a hospital, you know, where they have more babies than they have staff, and some babies that are very small just need to be held. They just need that comfort and assurance that there's somebody there, and they're not just sitting in a glass, you know, basin someplace for hours waiting for somebody to have time to attend to them. There's nothing particularly you have to do for them. You're just there to hold them. And that's in an environment which is, you know, very clean. It's obviously in a clean room where you wear masks and, you know, you have to put on special clothes and stuff. So it's not one that's risky to be in. So that's just another thing that pops to my mind, you know, but there's lots of things you could do with your time that would connect you with other people, which you see, and that's an important part of it. If you're just sitting by yourself, not connected to other people, you start to have this feeling of being disconnected, this feeling of not doing something meaningful, of just kind of hanging loose. And that feeling you have is really one that needs to connect more with other people and other things. It's not just doing stuff or things like, yes, okay, you could learn to knit. You could knit yourself a sweater, but you see, that leaves you right where you were. You're still not connecting. And the way you want to connect is in some way that you give to others. So yeah, holding little babies that need to be held, making recordings. But I suspect if you sat down and thought about it a while, you could come up with at least a dozen of those kinds of things that you could be of service in your community. You could work on a hotline, a suicide prevention hotline, or a depressed person's hotline, or there's those kinds of things too, where you just say, all right, for 1 hour a day, it may not be something you want to do for 5 or 6 hours. That could be something that you would find dragging you down more than pulling you up. But if it was just something you could do for an hour, maybe even only an hour a week, there's lots of those kinds of things too. So look around and see, where could I be of service? How could I help other people? What connection could I make where just my being there would make a difference? You can, they have the same things, not only for preemies, where you can hold small babies, but also with old folks, where you can go to places where there are old people who just don't have any friends, no family left. They're all by themselves, and just somebody to come in and sit down and talk to them is like a rare treat. And you can be that person. So there are things in your community that you can do that would make you feel very good about the time spent doing it, make connections with people, and be part of everybody's solution. And I think that's what you're really looking for. This I'm home alone with nothing to do sort of thing isn't really that what you want to do is knit sweaters or, darn socks or, rearrange all the furniture in your house. That's not the point. The point is to connect with other people and give something, be able to help somebody else in some way by using your time. That's the connection that gives back. That's the connection that you get 10 times more than what you give just because you give it. So I'd say look for those kinds of voluntary things to do. Often there's lots of need and not so many people willing to do it.
Yeah. Thanks. You've given me some wonderful things to think about. But you know me, I'll get in there and you know what'll happen.
Exactly, but that's good. You see, now suddenly a life that has extra time in it becomes busy. And
well, it's not that I'm not busy. It's just that when I have that free time, I am looking for something that is a respite. But
right.
Yeah. So just being there, as you say, is a contribution.
Yes, absolutely. And it is a respite because you're not just doing the same old thing. You're not going through the same motions. You're doing something totally different, but making connections just the same. It's that need to get away from what you do all the time. You need variety. You need more than one way to be helpful in the world. You can be helpful in the world in many ways. And if you just do it in this one way, it leaves you feeling a little empty, like, well, something's missing here. What else do I need to do? So reach out, find a way to be helpful, to be useful, to help other people in their need, and not doing what you usually do, something else. Of course, once you get in there, you'll start doing what you normally do anyway, because that's who you are, but that's okay. That will be still fun. And I think that's the hole that you're trying to fill.
Yeah, and I think it's really important for all of us to hear this kind of thing, because we don't want to get caught in these ripples, and we want to be as effective as we can and as helpful in situations that are happening across the globe without without feeling as though we're powerless and without feeling as though we have to change anything with people. It's just
Yeah.
being a participant in
Yeah.
something in that way.
Yeah, and I think you'll probably find there's even quite a few kind of outreach, education, and whatever things going on that you never even have to leave home. You can do them right on the internet where you connect to people and talk with them, that you never have to leave the house, but you will start being useful in a completely different pattern. And you'll find that very satisfying.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's what we give. It's what we're able to give in life that matters. Makes us feel good.